Distracted for a second, she was suddenly kissed by a powerful man she didn't know. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Emily Carter stands just inside the ballroom doors, the kind that glide open without a sound, the kind that make you feel like you're stepping into someone else's world. The air hums with quiet conversations and the soft clink of glassware, and the lights above cast a warm glow that makes everything look more expensive than it really is. Emily adjusts the badge clipped to her black dress, a borrowed one that pinches slightly at the side, and reminds herself she's only here to help manage guest flow, nothing more. She doesn't belong to the polished crowd in tailored suits and evening gowns, and she knows it. Her heels are sensible, not stylish, her hair pulled back in a way that says practical, not glamorous. She checks her phone for the time, distracted for just a second by a message from her landlord about rent due in 3 days, and that single moment is all it takes. Someone's hand gently but firmly catches her arm, turning her back toward the room, and before she can speak, before she can even understand what's happening, a man leans in and presses a brief kiss to her lips, confident, automatic, like it's something he's done 1,000 times without thinking. The room seems to freeze. Emily's heart stumbles, her mind scrambling to catch up as she pulls back, eyes wide, breath caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. The man in front of her is tall, composed, clearly used to being in control, and his expression shifts the instant he realizes the mistake. Around them, a few conversations falter, curious glances flicker in their direction, and Emily feels heat rush to her face. She steps back quickly, murmuring an apology she shouldn't have to give, the words tumbling out as her hands shake. The man says her name wrong, then stops, realizing he doesn't know it at all, and his voice lowers as he offers a rushed explanation, something about confusion, about thinking she was someone else. But the damage is already done. Emily can feel the weight of unspoken judgments pressing in, the assumption that she planned this, that she wanted attention, that she somehow crossed a line she didn't even know existed. She forces herself to straighten, to meet his eyes for one steady second, and in that glance she sees not arrogance, but surprise, maybe even regret. Still, regret doesn't erase embarrassment. She turns away, weaving through the crowd with her head high and her chest tight, telling herself she'll laugh about this someday, even if she knows that tonight she'll replay it over and over. Behind her, the man watches her go, his jaw set, a flicker of something unfamiliar stirring beneath his calm exterior, because for the first time in a long while, a simple mistake has left him unsettled, and he has no idea why. Emily does not stop walking until the ballroom doors slide shut behind her, and the muted music fades into a distant thrum, replaced by the quiet rush of blood in her ears. Her hands feel cold even though the corridor is warm, and she presses her palms together as if that might steady the tremor running through her fingers. She tells herself to breathe, slow and even, the way she learned during double shifts when customers snapped and managers hovered, but tonight the air feels thinner. She replays the moment again, the brief certainty in his movement, the way it looked to everyone else like something practiced, intentional, and she swallows hard, hating how easily a stranger's mistake can turn into her shame. A security guard passes, offering a polite nod, and Emily forces a small smile, the kind she has mastered, the kind that says everything is fine even when it is not. She steps into the service elevator, leaning back against the cool metal wall as it hums downward, counting the floors by the soft dings until the doors open to the lobby. The night outside is crisp, a hint of fall in the air, and she walks 3 blocks before she slows, heels clicking against the sidewalk, the city returning to its usual rhythm around her. She checks her phone again, the same message still there. Rent due in 72 hours, and she laughs under her breath at the timing, because of course life would choose this moment to remind her of everything else she is carrying. Back inside the building, the gala continues without her, conversations resuming, curiosity already drifting elsewhere, but inside the ballroom the man stands where she left him, jaw tight, eyes tracking the doors long after she disappears. Nathan Reed is used to mistakes being handled quietly, efficiently, smoothed over by assistance and apologies, but this one lingers, sharp and uncomfortable. He brushes off a concerned colleague with a brief explanation, his voice calm even as his thoughts churn, because he knows how it looked, and he knows how often women in spaces like this are blamed first. He tells himself it was a misunderstanding, a simple lapse. Yet the memory of her expression refuses to soften, the way she stood her ground for a second before walking away. The evening drags, speeches blending together, applause rising on cue, and when it finally ends, Nathan leaves early, the city lights reflecting off the windshield as he drives, his mind replaying not the deals discussed or the numbers agreed upon, but the quiet dignity of a woman who did not belong to his world and did not ask to be pulled into it. Across town, Emily unlocks the door to her apartment, a small one-bedroom she measures in steps rather than square feet, and sets her shoes by the door. She sinks onto the couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it spins, thinking about how quickly people decide who you are based on a single moment they do not understand. She changes into an old sweatshirt, pours a glass of water, and sits at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Tomorrow she will go back to work, answer emails, keep moving, because that is what she does. But tonight, as she finally exhales, she allows herself one honest thought, not about the kiss or the crowd, but about the strange certainty in that man's eyes when he realized he was wrong, and how sometimes the smallest mistakes leave the deepest marks on people who never meant to collide. Morning comes quietly, the way it always does when Emily would rather stay hidden from the world, and she wakes before her alarm, staring at the pale light creeping through the blinds. The apartment is still, measuring barely 500 square feet, every sound amplified, from the neighbor's footsteps overhead to the distant siren somewhere downtown. She swings her feet onto the floor and sits there for a moment, grounding herself, reminding herself that yesterday does not get to decide today. The kettle clicks on, coffee fills the air, and she opens her laptop at the small kitchen table, scrolling through emails with the practiced focus of someone who knows distractions cost time she cannot afford. There is a reminder from her bank about a balance that feels smaller every time she looks at it, and another message from her landlord, polite but firm, asking when he can expect payment. Emily types back a careful response, promising Friday, knowing she will need to pick up an extra shift or two to make that promise real. By 8:30, she is dressed for work, comfortable flats, simple blouse, hair pulled back, the same armor she wears every day, and she steps onto the bus with exact change, choosing a seat by the window. The city slides by in familiar fragments, coffee shops opening, delivery trucks double parked, people moving with purpose, and she watches it all with a quiet determination that has been earned, not given. At the office where she works part-time coordinating events and handling scheduling, no one mentions the gala, and she is grateful for that. She answers calls, sorts paperwork, and keeps her head down, but every so often her mind drifts back to the moment she wishes she could erase, not because of the man, but because of how small it made her feel. During lunch, she eats a sandwich she packed herself, counting the days until her next paycheck, and listens as coworkers talk about weekend plans she does not have. She smiles at the right moments, laughs when expected, and returns to her desk, finishing the day without complaint. Across town, Nathan sits in a glass-walled conference room, sunlight cutting across the table as numbers and projections flash on a screen, and he contributes when necessary, his voice steady, his focus sharp, but there is a subtle shift in him that no one else notices. He signs documents, fields questions, and moves through his schedule with ease, yet when he has a moment alone, he finds himself thinking about a woman who did not ask for anything from him, who walked away instead of leaning in. That evening, Emily stops by a small neighborhood grocery store, choosing items carefully, doing the math in her head as she places them in her basket. At the register, she hesitates over a small bouquet of discounted flowers, then sets them back, deciding they are a luxury she cannot justify. She walks home with bags cutting lightly into her hands, pauses at the corner to let a car pass, and catches her reflection in the darkened window of a closed shop. She looks tired, yes, but there is a steadiness there too, a quiet resolve shaped by years of making do. She unlocks her door, sets the groceries away, and sits at the table again, opening a worn notebook where she keeps track of hours, expenses, and small goals she refuses to let go of. Somewhere in the city, a powerful man is questioning a mistake he cannot undo, and in her small apartment, Emily is simply trying to build a life that no one else gets to define, unaware that the path she is walking and the path he is questioning are already bending toward each other. The following afternoon slips into evening with a soft gray sky, and Emily leaves work later than planned, shoulders tight from a day of rescheduled calls and last-minute changes. She cuts through a small side street to avoid traffic and ducks into a neighborhood coffee shop she knows by heart, the kind with scratched wooden tables and a bell that chimes when the door opens. The smell of roasted beans settles her nerves, and she orders her usual, medium drip, no extras, because routine feels like control. She waits near the counter, scrolling through her phone, calculating hours and miles, when the bell rings again and someone steps in behind her. Nathan has chosen the place without thinking, guided by instinct rather than habit, a rare thing for him, and he stands in line with his jacket unbuttoned, eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. He notices her profile first, the familiar line of her jaw, the way she tucks a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and something in his chest tightens before his mind catches up. She turns slightly to make room, polite and distant, and their eyes meet for the first time since the gala, but without context, without a spotlight or a crowd. Emily blinks, recognition flickering and then fading, because here he looks different, less imposing, just another man waiting for coffee. She offers a brief nod and a quiet "excuse me," and Nathan hears it, hears the steadiness in her voice, and chooses, deliberately, not to say anything that would break the moment. The barista calls her name, and Emily steps forward, fingers brushing the counter as she reaches for the cup, when it tips slightly, a few drops splashing toward the edge. Nathan reacts on instinct, steadying it with a quick hand, his touch brief and careful. She looks up, startled, then lets out a small breath of relief. "Thank you," she says, meeting his eyes, and he nods, saying "You are welcome," his voice low, measured, unfamiliar even to himself. They move aside together, an unplanned pause opening between them, and for a moment neither knows how to step away. Emily takes a sip, grimaces at the heat, and laughs softly at herself, the sound unguarded. Nathan smiles before he can stop himself, surprised by how easily it comes. He comments on the coffee being dangerously hot, and she agrees, joking that patience has never been her strength. They exchange names, first names only, casual, unweighted, and she does not connect him to the man in the ballroom, because he does not carry that world with him here. He asks if she works nearby, and she answers honestly, mentioning her job without embellishment, without apology. He listens, really listens, the way he does in meetings when something matters, and she notices, filing it away as unusual but welcome. Their conversation drifts to small things, the unpredictable weather, the construction down the block, the best time to come when the line is shorter, and it feels strangely easy, like slipping into a familiar rhythm with someone new. When her phone buzzes, reminding her of an errand she cannot put off, Emily hesitates, then excuses herself, lifting her cup in a small, friendly gesture. Nathan watches her go, the bell chiming again as the door swings shut, and he realizes he has just met her for the second time, without being able to explain the first. Emily steps back onto the sidewalk, the evening air cool against her face, unaware that the man she just shared a quiet moment with carries a name she would recognize instantly if she heard it, while Nathan remains inside, staring into his untouched cup, knowing he has chosen silence for now, and that choice will change everything. The days that follow settle into an unexpected pattern, one Emily does not question too closely, because it feels rare and fragile, like something that might vanish if examined too hard. She returns to the coffee shop the next evening to finish some work on her laptop, telling herself it is about the reliable Wi-Fi and the quiet hum of conversation, not the faint possibility of running into someone familiar. When Nathan walks in a few minutes later, she looks up in surprise, then smiles before she can stop herself, a reaction that feels honest and uncomplicated. They greet each other easily this time, no hesitation, and he asks if he can join her, gesturing to the empty chair across from her table. She shrugs lightly and says sure, as if it does not matter, even though a small part of her is curious why it does. They talk while she works, pausing between emails and notes, their conversation slipping naturally into deeper territory without either of them pushing it there. Emily mentions growing up in a small town, how she learned early to stretch a dollar and rely on herself, and Nathan listens with an attention that surprises her, asking questions that show he is not just waiting for his turn to speak. He shares pieces of his own life carefully, describing long hours, responsibility, the constant pressure to make decisions that affect other people, without ever mentioning titles or numbers. She notices the way he chooses his words, thoughtful, measured, and wonders what kind of work creates that habit. Over the next week, their meetings become something unspoken but understood, a shared pause in the middle of busy days. Sometimes it is coffee, sometimes a walk around the block when the weather allows, sometimes just sitting quietly while the city moves around them. Emily finds herself laughing more, the sound surprising her each time, and she catches herself wanting to tell him things she usually keeps guarded, like her fear of standing still, of falling behind, of being judged before being known. Nathan, in turn, feels a shift he has not allowed himself in years, a sense of being seen without expectation, without the weight of who he is outside these moments. He likes that she does not treat him differently, that she challenges him casually, teasing him when he overthinks simple things, calling him out when he avoids answering directly. One evening, they share a late slice of pizza at a place with bright lights and paper plates, standing at a narrow counter, and Emily talks about a dream she once had of opening a small event planning business, something creative and personal, before practical concerns pushed it aside. Nathan asks why she stopped believing it was possible, and she answers honestly that believing costs energy she does not always have. He nods, not offering solutions, just acknowledging the truth of it, and she feels lighter for having said it out loud. As they part ways that night, there is a moment where their hands brush, brief and unintentional, and Emily notices how natural it feels, not charged, just right. She walks home with a warmth that has nothing to do with the weather, thinking about how strange it is to feel understood by someone who does not know her history in detail. Nathan returns to his apartment, the city stretching out beneath his windows, and for once the view does not command his attention. Instead, he thinks about a woman who lives in a 500-square-foot apartment, who counts her hours and her steps, who carries herself with quiet strength, and he wonders how long he can keep the line between who he is here and who he is everywhere else. Neither of them says it yet, but something real is forming in the spaces between conversations, something built not on status or assumptions, but on the simple act of showing up, day after day, as themselves. The invitation arrives on a Thursday morning, slipped into Emily's inbox between vendor confirmations and calendar updates, and she almost deletes it without reading, assuming it is another mass email meant for someone else. But the subject line catches her attention, a formal tone paired with the name of a foundation she recognizes from news articles and city banners. She opens it slowly, rereading the words twice, then a third time, because it mentions an open community event, a public forum on urban development and local partnerships, and it lists a keynote speaker whose name makes her pause. Nathan Reed. The name settles into place with a quiet click, connecting dots she did not know she had been holding apart. Her chest tightens, not with excitement, but with a strange mix of clarity and unease, and she leans back in her chair, staring at the screen. All the small details resurface at once, the careful way he spoke, the ease with which he listened, the confidence he carried without display, and suddenly the man in the coffee shop and the man in the ballroom align into one undeniable truth. That evening, she stands at the back of a crowded auditorium, hands clasped in front of her, watching him take the stage under bright lights as the room fills with applause. His posture is familiar now, but the context changes everything, and when the moderator introduces him as the Chief Executive Officer of Reed Global, the weight of it lands fully. Emily feels exposed, as if a private story has been pulled into public view without her consent, and she wonders how many moments were shaped by omission. Nathan speaks clearly, thoughtfully, about responsibility and long-term impact, about listening to communities instead of dictating to them, and the audience nods along, engaged, impressed. Emily listens too, catching the sincerity in his words. But her focus drifts to the space between what he says and what he did not say to her. When the talk ends, people surge forward with questions and greetings, and Emily considers leaving quietly, slipping out before she is noticed, before she has to decide how she feels. But as she turns, her movement catches his eye, and for a brief second the crowd fades. Nathan's expression changes, surprise giving way to something heavier, and he steps away from the group without hesitation, moving toward her with purpose that draws a few curious glances. He stops a respectful distance away, his voice low as he says her name, this time correctly, and the sound of it feels different now. Emily meets his gaze, steady but guarded, and acknowledges him with a simple hello. There is an apology in his eyes before he speaks, an understanding that explanations will not undo what has already been revealed. He begins to say something about timing, about wanting to keep things simple, but she raises a hand gently, not to stop him, but to claim space for herself. She tells him she understands why he did not lead with his title, but that understanding does not erase the feeling of being kept in the dark. Around them, the event continues, people laughing, networking, unaware of the quiet reckoning unfolding at the edge of the room. Nathan listens, truly listens, as she speaks about trust and choice, about how easily power can tilt a balance even when it is unintentional. He does not defend himself, does not minimize her reaction, and when he responds, he does so without polish, admitting that he enjoyed being seen without the weight of expectation and that he feared losing that if the truth came first. Emily absorbs his words, the honesty in them, and feels the conflict settle deeper rather than resolve. She tells him she needs time, not because she is angry, but because she respects herself enough to process what this means. He nods, accepting the boundary without argument, and steps back, giving her room to leave if she chooses. As Emily walks out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring slightly as her eyes adjust, she knows something has shifted irrevocably. The connection they built was real, but now it stands at the intersection of truth and consequence, and whatever comes next will have to meet her on equal ground. The days after the forum pass more slowly than Emily expects, each hour stretching as she returns to her routines with a heightened awareness of everything she had tried to keep simple. She goes to work, answers calls, coordinates schedules, and smiles when required, but the ease she felt before is replaced by a quiet vigilance. Nathan does not reach out immediately, honoring the space she asked for, and that restraint unsettles her more than constant messages would have. She thinks about him in fragments, the man who listened across a scratched wooden table, the executive commanding a room with practiced calm, and she wonders where one ends and the other begins. Late one evening, as she locks up the office after staying late to finish a project that could not wait, she finds him standing across the street under a streetlight, hands in his pockets, posture careful rather than imposing. He does not approach until she notices him, giving her the choice to walk away if she wants to, and that detail matters more than he knows. She crosses the street slowly, stopping a few feet away, and the city hums around them, traffic passing, lights changing, life continuing as if this moment is not heavy. Nathan tells her he did not come to convince her of anything, only to be honest in a way he was not before, and his voice is steady but stripped of polish. Emily listens, arms folded loosely, not defensive but protective, and when she speaks, the words come out sharper than she expects. She tells him how small she felt at the gala, how the reveal made her question every conversation, every laugh, every shared silence, and she admits that what hurts most is not that he is powerful, but that he decided for her what she could handle. Nathan absorbs it without interruption, his jaw tightening briefly before he nods, acknowledging the truth in her words. He explains that his world is built on control and risk management, that he learned early to separate who he is from what he represents because blending them comes at a cost, but he does not offer it as an excuse. He tells her that meeting her without those layers felt like breathing fresh air after years indoors, and that he was afraid that once she knew, she would only see the title. Emily counters that she did not ask to be protected from reality, that respect means trusting someone with the truth even when it is uncomfortable. The tension between them sharpens, not explosive, but real, the kind that demands clarity. A passing car slows, then moves on, leaving them standing in the glow of the streetlight, faces open, vulnerable. Nathan finally says what he has been avoiding, that he kissed the wrong person that night because power had taught him the world would move around him, and that assumption hurt her. Emily hears the ownership in his voice, and something in her softens, not into forgiveness, but into recognition. She tells him she does not want to be a lesson or a project, and he answers that he does not want to make amends with gestures that erase her agency. They stand there longer than necessary, neither stepping closer nor farther away, until Emily takes a breath and sets a boundary that feels true to her. She says she is willing to continue, slowly, only if everything is honest from here on. No omissions, no curated versions of reality. Nathan agrees without hesitation, the simplicity of his answer carrying weight. As they part, there is no resolution wrapped in certainty, only a fragile understanding forged through confrontation. And as Emily walks home under the dimming sky, she realizes that whatever happens next will be shaped not by a powerful man's choices, but by her own. The shift begins quietly, the way Emily prefers it, with a clipboard in hand and a list of tasks that keep her focused on what she can control. The community center buzzes with activity as volunteers move tables and set up chairs, the air filled with the low murmur of conversation and the scrape of metal legs against the floor. Emily checks names, confirms schedules, and adjusts signage, unaware that something larger is unfolding beyond the walls she knows so well. When the event starts, she steps back, watching families filter in, students taking seats, local business owners greeting one another, and she feels a familiar sense of satisfaction at seeing something come together through steady effort rather than spectacle. Halfway through the evening, a ripple of attention moves through the room, subtle at first, then unmistakable, and Emily looks up to see Nathan standing near the entrance, not at the center, not announcing himself, simply present. He does not approach her immediately, and she notices that choice, the restraint in it, and it eases the tension she did not realize she was holding. The program continues, speakers sharing ideas about access, opportunity, and collaboration, and Emily listens with growing curiosity as Nathan is introduced not as a donor or executive, but as a partner in a new initiative supporting grassroots projects. When he takes the microphone, he does not speak about himself for long. Instead, he acknowledges the people in the room, the organizers, the planners, the ones who keep things running without recognition, and Emily feels the words land closer than she expects. He explains that leadership is not defined by position, but by action, and that accountability begins with admitting when power has been misused, even unintentionally. There is no dramatic confession, no naming of private moments, just a clear ownership of responsibility that carries weight because it is public and unadorned. When he finishes, the applause is warm but not overwhelming, and he steps down, blending back into the crowd. Only then does he approach Emily, stopping a respectful distance away, his expression open. He tells her quietly that he did not want to fix things with a gesture that erased her voice, so he chose something else, something aligned with what she values. He explains that the initiative was shaped by listening to people like her, by redirecting resources toward ideas that already exist rather than imposing new ones. Emily listens, absorbing the sincerity in his tone, the consistency between his words and actions, and she realizes this is not about her alone. It is about choosing to stand where accountability is visible. She thanks him, not out of obligation, but because it feels earned, and she tells him she noticed the way he stayed on the edges, letting others take the spotlight. They walk together through the room, greeting volunteers, answering questions, moving naturally as part of the same rhythm. Later, outside under the soft glow of streetlights, the night air cool against their faces, Emily pauses, considering the path she has been walking. She tells Nathan that trust is built in moments like this, not grand declarations, but consistent choices. He nods, accepting that this is not a conclusion, but a continuation. When they part, there is no rush, no promise spoken aloud, just a shared understanding that something has shifted, not because power was displayed, but because it was placed in service of something larger. And for the first time since the night everything went wrong, Emily feels grounded in the knowledge that her worth was never defined by someone else's mistake, but by her own steady integrity. The morning Emily wakes to feels different, not dramatic or bright, but settled, as if something inside her has finally aligned. Sunlight filters through the blinds, landing on the small table where her notebook rests. Pages filled with careful plans and half-written ideas she once thought were too fragile to pursue. She makes coffee and stands by the window, watching the city wake up, feeling grounded in a way she has not in a long time. Over the next weeks, life does not suddenly become easier, but it becomes clearer. She takes on more responsibility at work, trusted now with larger projects, and she begins sketching out a proposal for a community-based event planning service, something modest but meaningful. Nathan remains present, not hovering, not directing, showing up when invited, listening more than speaking. They meet in ordinary places, a park bench during lunch, a quiet bookstore on a rainy afternoon, spaces where conversation flows without pretense. One evening, as they walk along the river, the city lights reflecting softly on the water, Nathan tells her he has made changes that will cost him influence in some circles, but feel necessary. Emily does not praise him for it, but she acknowledges the choice, understanding that real shifts are rarely comfortable. When she finally shares her plans with him, her voice steady but vulnerable, he does not offer to fund or fix them. Instead, he asks what support looks like to her, and when she answers, he respects it, stepping into the role she defines rather than the one he assumes. Months pass, marked by small milestones rather than grand gestures. Emily secures her first independent contract, celebrating with takeout on her couch, laughter filling the room as Nathan helps her toast with mismatched glasses. She feels pride not because of who stands beside her, but because of the path she has carved herself. At a neighborhood event she organizes, she watches families and local vendors connect, the space alive with energy, and she catches Nathan across the crowd, not at the center, but engaged, present, exactly where he belongs. Later, as the night winds down and they walk together through quiet streets, Emily stops, turning to face him under the glow of a street lamp. She tells him she is no longer carrying the weight of that first mistake, that she sees him now fully, with context and choice. Nathan listens, emotion clear in his eyes, and when he speaks, he does not promise perfection or certainty. He tells her he chooses honesty, accountability, and partnership, knowing those choices must be renewed every day. Emily takes a breath, feeling the truth of her own growth settle in her chest, and she reaches for his hand, the gesture simple, intentional, hers. It is not a declaration to the world, but it is real. As they continue walking, the city stretching out around them, Emily reflects on how a moment of confusion once threatened to define her, and how she refused to let it. What remains is not a story of power overpowering humility, but one of balance restored through integrity and choice. The future ahead is unwritten, but it is hers, shaped by actions rather than assumptions. And as she moves forward with a man who has learned to meet her on equal ground, she knows that the most important commitment she made was to herself.